The Lisa was first introduced on January 19, 1983. It is one of the first personal computer systems with a graphical user interface to be sold commercially. It uses a Motorola 68000 CPU clocked at 5 MHz and has 1 MB of RAM. Shipping at $9,995 with 5 MB hard drives and sales of only 10,000 units in 2 years. The integrated monochrome black and white monitor had 720 by 364 rectangular pixels on a 12-inch screen. Macintosh was launched in January 1984, quickly surpassing Lisa sales. Newer Lisa models were introduced that addressed its faults and lowered its price considerably, but the platform failed to achieve favorable sales compared to the much less expensive Mac. At Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, research had already been underway for several years to create a humanized way to organize the computer screen, today known as the desktop metaphor. Steve Jobs visited Xerox PARC in 1979 and was absorbed and excited by the revolutionary mouse-driven GUI of the Xerox Alto. Macintosh was also coded mostly in assembly, which led to serious bugs but greater performance. First, the primarily Pascal-coded Lisa software. Pascal was used for Lisa mainly to save development time, which also included a great deal of quality assurance as the machine was intended for professionals, given the high complexity of the software. In 1984 was the release of the first revision of the Lisa 2, which also included a single 400K Sony micro floppy. Apple provided free upgrades to Lisa 1 owners to Lisa 2 hardware, including the replacement of the Twiggy drives with a single Sony drive. With the introduction of the Lisa 210, the optional 10 MB compact internal proprietary hard drive, which was manufactured by Apple, known as the Widget, was offered. Conceptually, the Lisa resembles the Xerox Star in the sense that it was envisioned as an office computing system. It also resembles Microsoft Office from a software standpoint in that its software is designed to be an integrated office suite. Lisa has two main user groups, the Lisa Office System and the Workshop. The Lisa Office System is the GUI environment for end users. The Workshop is a program development environment and is almost entirely text-based through its uses a GUI text editor. The Lisa Office System supplied programs for Lisa Write, Lisa Calc, Lisa Draw, Lisa Graph, Lisa Project, Lisa List, and Lisa Terminal. In April 1984, following the release of the Macintosh, Apple introduced MacWorks, a software emulation environment which also allows the Lisa to run Macintosh system software and applications. The Apple Lisa was a commercial failure for Apple. Apple sold approximately 10,000 Lisa machines. The largest Lisa customer was NASA, which used Lisa Project for project management. By the time the Lisa was available in the market, the less expensive and less powerful IBM PC had already become entrenched. The x86 platform backwards compatibility with the CP/M operating system was helpful for the PC, given that many existing business software applications originally were written for CP/M. The 1984 release of the Macintosh further eroded the Lisa's marketability as the public perceived that Apple was abandoning it in favor of the Macintosh. Any marketing of the Macintosh clashed with promotion of the Lisa, since Apple had not made the platforms compatible. Reportedly, 2,700 working but unsold Lisa computers were buried in a landfill. So what I'm going to show you today is the Lisa 210. So it's the Lisa 2 with a 10 MB drive inside it. And we're going to boot it up, and after we boot up, I'm going to show you some examples of the original suite that came with the Lisa. So to power on the Lisa, there's one single button underneath the main console area. You push on, and the Lisa will come on. And when the Lisa starts, it actually does its testing of the CPU, the memory, and the I/O interface. And it's starting right now, and it's testing the CPU, it's testing the memory, and it'll be testing the I/O interface, and then it'll start. and it's booting right now. And it boots into a Office suite that it starts up into. Mouse just came up, and you'll see the Office suite will save in a second. There we go. The Lisa Office system released 3.1, and it's similar to a Macintosh in many ways, how the screen opens up. It's asking me to set the clock. I have to set the clock. And then you have some of the similar tools as you would have on the Mac, but a little bit different. So the software is the primary software that's shipped with it. So the Lisa Draw, Lisa Terminal, Lisa Graph, Lisa List, Lisa Project, Lisa Write, and Lisa Calc. And these are the main software that was written for the Lisa. So let's open up Lisa Write. And when you double click the folder to open Lisa Write, you have different types of things you want. So when you want to start Lisa Write, you open up a Lisa Write paper. And now it made a paper for me. And then double clicking that starts the word processor. And very similar to Mac Write, similar type of concept, you have what you see is what you get, WYSIWYG type of screen. So hello. This is a test. And you can highlight. You can do different styles. So here's 24 point. We can make it bold. We can do the page layouts. We can preview pages. We can do different types of things with it. It's really, really cool. And it had spelling. So let's say instead of test, I do ESG. I can click spelling, find next. So it's preparing the spelling system. And it just loaded the dictionary in there. And this is pretty advanced at the time. Verification is complete. Hopefully it found it. Let's say. So it found that the word should be test right there, and that's the one we want. And it just fixed it. So think about that. In 1983, we had spell check, which was pretty amazing for a machine at the time. So when this is done, basically everything you can set aside. So you can save and put away, save and continue, or set aside. So I'm going to set it aside. And then we go back to the folder structure here. And we can go back to the tools, right? And it has here what we were using. So here's the Lisa Write. So it keeps it there, but it sets it aside, right? We can go put it back in here. We can put it anywhere we want, just like the other thing. So the other one is Lisa Draw. So Lisa Draw, here's examples. There's some examples they give us. So getting started. And Lisa Draw was also another powerful application, similar to Mac Draw for the Lisa. And you can see how much slower this takes to run than the Mac. The Mac was quicker to start the applications than the Lisa. But this obviously was amazing as one of the first GUI machines compared to what the other machines were selling at the time. And here's a simple example of being able to draw something on the screen. And here we just drew a box, and we can put text in here. And you can see, compared to other workstations and other commercial available machines, this was pretty amazing to what you could do with it at the time. It's a great machine, works great, and once again, here we can go and see the different tools, what's available. We can print this. We can look at what the printer is, and this will print to the Apple image writer or the image writer 2, and you can look at different types of fills that you could say, okay, I want to fill this box right here with a shadowing. So now it's been shadowed. There's different pen line colors, you name it, and actually different colors. So if we had a color output for a color printer, it would be able to distinguish the different background colors for this. Instead of the fill patterns right now, I'm doing the actual colors. This doesn't have a color screen. Obviously, it's a monochrome screen, and then go from there. So I'm going to exit out of this. And once again, I'll set aside. So I will not save. I'll just do set aside getting started. And when you set it aside, you close what it was. One of the downfalls of the Lisa was it had very few applications that were available for the Lisa. And this is a beautiful example. The Lisa project, which was one of the tools that NASA and other organizations that bought the Lisa for would use it. It was a pretty complex project management system, and I'm letting it start up right now. One of the downfalls, like I said, at least it takes a little bit of time to start up. This one only had a megabyte of memory at the time, which was pretty considerable, considering that when the first Macintoshes came out, they only had 128K. So here's an example for project management, and this is showing a flow chart here that one can do. And one could do a scheduler, resource tasks, different type of flow charting or other charting one could do to help visualize information. And this made the Lisa very popular for organizations that had complex flow charting and other types of things, thus NASA and other agencies similar to that. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a shutdown here. So I am going to put everything away. I'm going to set aside this to get started. And with the Lisa, you simply could not shut it off. On the Mac and other ones that were just purely disk-based, you could just power it off, eject the disk, and shut it down. For the Lisa, I'm going to put away the desktop here, so make sure it's all nice and clean. And there's actually a housekeeping button here. You can change how also you want to look at things. You can make things alphabetical, chronological view, pictorial view, which is, I'm going to close this, right? And at this point, you're in just in the desktop sitting there. And in order to power down the Lisa, you need to push the power button again and then let it close itself down. And that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to push the button once. The Lisa now putting everything away. And it will shut itself down. And this was a new concept for machines, because most machines you would simply just power off. CPM or DOS machines, as soon as you're done with them and the program is not writing to any floppy disk, you just simply shut it off. Where on this machine you have to wait, so it would do its housekeeping to make sure everything was put away correctly before powering itself down, thus preventing any damage or loss of files in there. Now it says the Lisa's turning off, and then it'll turn itself off at that point, which today everyone does. Everyone uses a sleep or a shutdown function on their modern machines. You just simply don't power it off in the middle of what it's doing. This was pretty revolutionary in 1983 compared to machines at the time that were simply doing it, and now it just shut off all on its own. And the next time it'd be ready would be you'd push the button again, the one button and stuff like that. The last thing I want to talk about real quick is this keyboard. This keyboard actually has felt pads underneath it. It's a very complex keyboard and very expensive keyboard to make. And the rumor is that Steve Jobs consulted with hundreds of people who did secretarial work and asked their opinion on the different touches of the keyboard. and then he had a custom designed keyboard that used these special pads that are in here that actually are foil. There's a foil, and then there's a little bit of foam in between the foil to create just the correct pressure to create a nice feeling of doing it. So these keyboards wear, unfortunately. So what ends up happening is the foam disintegrates and the keys no longer work well. So usually when you restore the Apple Lisa keyboard, you have to take it all apart, take off all the foam, and get new foam discs, which are still available. And then you can put them in, and then the whole keyboard works. The unfortunate part of that, it added tremendous expense to the keyboard to do that. In other generations, they were simply micro switches that were used in the keyboard versus the foam, which dampened a little bit of the feel. The whole thing slides underneath, so when you're ready to put it away, there's a keyboard here. The keyboard also was unique in that it had a single jack, looks like a 1/4 mono jack, stereo jack. So it was very different, the type of keyboard that would plug in. And the keyboard would simply slide underneath like this to put it away. The other nice feature of this was there was a help tray underneath. So actually you could pull this out, and underneath had a whole bunch of different topics here that you could look at that were underneath the keyboard that gave you additional things. So preferences, how to use the mouse. So there's information here on how to use the mouse and the desktop to show the desktop. And then it had different things showing how to use the different menu structures. Copy and paste was here as well. And then there was also an area where you can put in information. So you actually could write here any configuration data that you had, that you could write your serial number of your Lisa, etc., and any support contact numbers. Remember, when this came out, one of the tasks that had to be had was learning how to use a mouse, the whole process of cutting and pasting and doing all that. So they needed additional instructions. There's actually a whole Lisa manual set that comes with this Lisa as well, but having these quick pull-out cards underneath gave you a quick reference that you could use underneath to take a look at some of the things that were here. Hope you've enjoyed looking at the Lisa. It's an amazing machine, and it's one of the prized pieces in our collection of the museum, and it's really wonderful that we have it working and we continue to make it work and make improvements on it. Thank you.